Now for our next session, a talk on the digital future for girls in Pakistan from the co-founder of the Women's Advancement Hub, Ms. Aisha Sarwari.
In 2015, I met an unforgettable girl. Her name was Maliha. She was in a faraway village in a province in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. If you know about Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, it is either underserved or it is unserved. In Maliha's village, it was very hard to find a girls' school. It was very hard to find clean drinking water. It was very hard to find basic necessities. And most girls were actually outside the realm of government services. But Maliha had the most amazing smile and she had the wisest of eyes. Obviously, poverty had both strengthened and weakened her. And I was there because I was monitoring a program for adolescent girls on behalf of a donor. And I traveled all the way far, which was a big deal for me. I asked Maliha what brought her to this program and how she learned about it. So she looked at me and said, Baji, I got a cell phone on my 15th birthday as a gift from my brother. I was recovering from some injuries because of some violence in the house, and my brother felt bad for me and he gave me a small feature phone. I was like, okay, but how did you get to the program? What does the feature phone have to do with your being here in a skills-based learning program where you're learning graphics design? So she said, well, I have a feature phone. She showed it to me. I was like, yeah, I know, Maliha, but how did you get to the program? So she said, because I got permission to go to the program. And then she explained, she said, before the feature phone, I was not allowed outside my front door because it's unsafe. But with the feature phone, my brother, my brothers, my dad, who's very difficult, allowed me to step out of the house as long as they could reach me at any time and they could know where I was going. And the community people supported that by coming to the house and talking to the family and convincing them to give her permission. Girls like Maliha live in a permission culture, but that feature phone in 2015, something we don't even consider as much technology, gave her access to independence. It gave her access to mobility, which my colleague Salman will soon be talking about in terms of how important mobility is for young women. It gave her access to an identity, and it made her a graphics designer. She works on Upwork and she's a freelancer today. Maliha went on to, despite being illiterate and not being able to write her words down on a piece of paper or her name on a piece of paper, she went on to make enough money through the internet, so she earned more than her father ever had in his lifetime. And she ended up earning twice as much as her brother. And because she couldn't go to school, she educated the two younger siblings that she had until metric. Girls like Maliha are what made Pakistan what it is today. And the technology of the cell phone are a big enabler. It's no longer a luxury. It's part of the human rights dynamic of a changing world. Unfortunately, Pakistan is the third worst in the world when it comes to the gender index. And we have much more to do for this, but there's no shortage of courage in this country. From the Oscars to the Fields Medal, people of Pakistani origin and Pakistani women have done extraordinary things in this country. My story is a lot like Maliha. I was a small town girl. I grew up in Africa, East Africa, in a small town called Pale, Uganda. My dad was an educationist, he was a teacher, and so he was tasked by a Commonwealth program to go into unserved areas and teach. While he was teaching university students, I ended up learning nothing under a tree because the standard of education, although the British school system was somewhat good, there wasn't much in terms of the quality of learning. And I ended up not being able to know what comes after 100 when I was 15, and I ended up not being able to string a sentence together at age 15. It was also because I had dyslexia, so I had some learning challenges as well. But my life changed when, similarly to Maliha, my own brother enabled me, after my father's demise, to open the world up through this magic thing that we call the internet. I remember my first Yahoo account. I was just fascinated. I don't know if you remember the old days with the dial-up internet and the horrific way we used to wait for hours to connect to the world. And it was just fascinating that I had an email address where I could connect with with anyone around the world, and I could get challenged with my views and my small town, ethos of here's how the life and work should be, and here's what gender stereotypes are, got severely challenged. And it was both exciting and scary because there was no one teaching you how to use the internet. You had to self-learn and self-teach, and it was fascinating. It gave you the curiosity to learn more than anything. It gives you the thirst to learn. And unfortunately, we're not doing that much in our schools. We're not teaching children to be curious. So essentially, I got saved by the internet, a lot like Maliha did. And there's a theory that I made up with the help of somebody called the original system software theory. Girls between the ages of 15 and 18 are essentially developing their original system software. After 18, not much of that original software can be changed. So your values, your ethos, the things you think you can do, the dreams you think you can have, pretty much get developed in that. And whatever life comes to you after that is an input and output based on that original system software. According to UNICEF, if you have education and empowerment interventions for girls between the ages of 15 and 18, you can delay marriage, and that's very important because we are one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the country and child mortality rates in the country because of underage marriages. You can teach girls to space their children. You can teach girls to actually learn more about basic things like hygiene, and survival rates and the quality of life improves. By giving girls a cell phone or access to technology that enables and empowers them, makes them feel safer, and gives them the world, we can actually improve the original system software of Pakistani girls. There are some things that are very simple, and a simple thing like a cell phone can really transform the economy. We have an economy where women and girls actually don't contribute much, and we teach girls to wait for some prince to come save us or some fairy godmother to come fix our problems with some magic wand. But in today's world, the magic wand is the cell phone, particularly a smartphone, because that gives you far more greater scale to change the world than a feature phone can. And one of the difference between the Pakistani women who made it and girls like Maliha is class status. And I want to talk a little about intersectionalism. When we talk about feminism, it's not just important to understand if somebody is a woman or a man. It's important to understand, in addition to being a woman, what other privilege challenges did they have? Did they come from a poor background? Did they have learning disabilities? Did they have a permission culture? Did they, for instance, come from a place where there was a language barrier? So intersectionalism is a very important aspect to also considering how to empower women. And although not all Pakistani women can be princesses, women from middle-class backgrounds and even lower middle-class backgrounds, it's very important to understand that a phone solves poor girls' problems. I'll give you an example. There's an app called Bima, in which Jazz is partnering with a company where we do microinsurance. At the cost of about 20 rupees, a person can insure their children for, say, about a week against something that would enable them to get emergency care and enable them to have medicines. There's Sehat Kahani, a woman CEO has created that, a wonderful service. There's Zoya, Daniel Sharaf has created that app where girls' menstrual hygiene and education on menstrual hygiene is very important, so you don't need to limit girls. There's obviously Uber and Careem and Airbnb. We don't understand how much this has enabled women to go out into the world and live the dreams that they got into their original system software, but then were crushed at a later date. The gig economy in Pakistan, I don't know if you know this, is the 4th largest in the world. And women greatly contribute to it because, again, of the permission culture, they're not really allowed much out of the house. I know a girl from Balochistan who was part of the program for entrepreneurship. She married into a conservative family in Balochistan. She was not allowed to work after that. She was one of the most brilliant women in STEM. And because she wasn't allowed, and she was expecting and pregnant, she decided that this is her life. So she would just stay in her room all day, have food served to her in her room and all of that. And she started doing some e-commerce online. Eventually what happened was she made a lot of money. And when she received an award in China, her husband and her mother-in-law, who had restricted her initially, went with her to receive the award. it changed that family dynamics. It essentially got the family to unlearn certain stereotypes and to support the women that they had once oppressed. The case for equality is really large, and Elango points this out all the time. He says approximately 30% of the economy grows in terms of GDP if you have gender equality. 30%. For a country like Pakistan with fiscal challenges, that is huge. That is thousands of jobs and millions of people empowered. So think about it. But also think about the fact that how low do we have to be to make a business case to give women dignity? When we talk about women's dignity, we shouldn't have to make a business case for it. We should give women and girls rights because it's the right thing to do. When you think about cell phones, cost is one of the biggest impediments to cell phones and cell phone access. So GSMA says that the reason Pakistan is not progressing in terms of ICT readiness is because the cost of cell phones is very high. Interestingly, the cost of feature phones that are not internet enabled is really low, and the taxation policy on smartphones is really high. So you're actually taking the country back into non-internet use. We're the only country that does that. We should review those policies. So there's a KaiOS phone that has been recently launched with the partnership of Jazz, which actually costs under 2,000 rupees to be enabled. It's packaged, it's actually costing like a features phone, similar to the one Maliha had, but it has all the features of a smartphone. So affordability is not a technological barrier. Affordability just requires you to make collaborations with the government, the donor sector, and the private sector. If you give girls the world using a cell phone, you have 50 million girls in Pakistan that are waiting for you to help make that collaborative decision, to be a part of the story that we're really hyping up about digital Pakistan, and to let them be part of telling that story. You know, when we talk about women, we talk about what happens to them. Women don't talk about what they do. So you have to switch the narrative and change that. And again, Elango and the World Bank had this really interesting idea of creating a woman-only phone, which has features enabled for security, which have features enabled for the ability to be tracked when you're moving around. Harassment and violence is a real big problem in this place, and it limits us. Interestingly, patriarchy says we can't empower women because there's bad stuff out there, but the bad stuff out there is created by the men. So we have to switch that, empower women. And it's the men for whom, like Maliha's brother or my brothers, or the people in our lives that empower us, like Salman Sufi, who's done so much for feminism in this country. Patriarchy is not limited to gender, and feminism is not limited to gender. These are equality ideas. And lastly, I wanted to also say that Maliha wanted to be a graphics designer. Shazal Malik, everybody knows her, is a feminist artist. She's done really well. She's, had international acclaim. And one day I really hope to see that girls like Maliha in a really remote area in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa become as big as her. And that equalizing force is the internet. That is 4G, 5G technology, and that is the smartphone. The president of JICA quoted Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and I'm so glad he did that. Jinnah is one of my biggest heroes, and I think that a lot of problems in this country are faced by not harking back to his mission. Jinnah said, you cannot, so he said, no nation can rise to the heights of glory until your women are side by side with you. If Jinnah was here today, what would he say? Any guesses? I think he would say, if the women in your life do not have the same smartphone technology as you, no nation can rise to the height of glory. I'd like to leave that idea with you. Thank you.